So, you want to own a poultry farm. From the road, the business can look almost mechanical. Birds arrive. Feed goes in, chickens grow, or hens lay eggs, trucks leave, and money comes back. But poultry ownership is not really a simple livestock business. It is a capital-heavy production system where buildings, ventilation, water, energy, contracts, disease control, labor, debt, and biological performance all have to work at the same time. A farm can move an enormous amount of product and still leave the owner with surprisingly little cash after expenses. This breakdown will show what it can cost to build or acquire a commercial poultry operation in the United States, how broiler and layer farms earn money, where the cash actually goes, and what separates a durable operation from one that becomes financially trapped. The first choice is not the land or the breed. It is the business model. A broiler farm raises chickens for meat. A layer farm produces eggs. Breeder operations supply fertile eggs, and hatcheries convert those eggs into die-old chicks. Those businesses share the word poultry, but economically they are different machines. A grower raising broilers under contract may never own the birds or buy the feed. An independent egg producer may own the flock, buy the feed, market the eggs, carry price risk, and manage replacement birds. That difference changes the amount of working capital required, the type of revenue received, and who absorbs swings in commodity prices. For most newcomers looking at commercial scale in the United States, the two useful models to compare are contract broilers and independent or integrated layer production. Contract broilers can reduce exposure to chicken and feed prices, but they usually require the grower to finance expensive specialized buildings. Layers can produce much higher gross sales, but the owner may carry more feed, flock, marketing, and egg price risk. Neither model should be evaluated from revenue alone. Before buying anything, the site has to work. A poultry farm needs more than cheap rural acreage. It needs zoning and environmental compatibility, reliable road access for feed and live haul trucks, strong electrical service, adequate water, drainage, room for litter or manure management, and enough separation from neighbors or other poultry facilities to satisfy local rules and disease control needs. Those requirements differ by state and county, so one national setback number is not reliable. A property that looks inexpensive can become costly if the road has to be upgraded. A large well must be drilled. Electrical capacity must be extended, or permitting delays construction. This channel is about that. Difference between the attractive headline number and the economics underneath it. We look at what businesses cost to own, how they produce revenue, where expenses accumulate, and why a busy operation is not automatically a profitable one. If that kind of ownership breakdown is useful to you, subscribe, because poultry farming is one of the clearest examples of how a business can look simple while operating like an industrial system. Now look at the buildings. A modern broiler house is not a traditional open barn. It is a purpose-built environmental system designed to keep tens of thousands of birds within a narrow range of temperature, humidity, airflow, water availability, and feeding access. Commercial houses are often hundreds of feet long. A farm may operate several of them as one complex. Mississippi State Extension notes that a 4-house broiler farm can exceed $1 million for poultry houses and equipment alone before the cost of land. The exact total depends on dimensions, local construction prices, integrator specifications, site preparation, and how much infrastructure already exists inside each house. Money is tied up in systems that customers will never see. Feed bins store bulk feed outside. Augers move it into pan feeders. Pressurized drinker lines distribute water. Controllers monitor temperature and operate fans, air inlets, heaters, cooling pads, alarms, and sometimes lighting programs. Tunnel ventilation can move enormous volumes of air through the building during hot weather. Cooling pads add evaporative cooling. Heating equipment protects young chicks when they require a much warmer environment than older birds. Water capacity is easy to underestimate. Extension guidance for a typical 500-foot broiler house has cited roughly 10 gallons per minute when drinking demand and cooling pad demand are combined, meaning a 4-house complex may need around 40 gallons per minute under those assumptions. Larger houses or different systems can require more. That is why the water source is not simply a farmhouse well with a larger pipe attached. Pumps, Storage, backup plans, water quality, and line capacity become production infrastructure. Electricity and fuel are just as important. Fans, feed systems, controllers, pumps, alarms, and lights depend on power. Heating can consume thousands of gallons of propane per house in some climates and production systems. A grower, therefore, has two separate energy problems: the recurring utility bill and the operational risk of losing power. If a hot house full of market-sized birds loses ventilation, heat and moisture can build quickly. Extension specialists warn that electrical or mechanical failures can lead to the loss of an entire house of birds in a short period. That makes a properly sized standby generator, automatic transfer equipment, alarms, maintenance, and regular testing part of the core production system, not optional insurance against an unlikely event. This is also why buying an existing poultry farm can be very different from building one. An older farm may appear cheaper because the houses already exist, but the real question is whether they meet the current requirements of the company placing birds. Ventilation capacity, insulation, controllers, feeders, drinkers, cooling systems, backup power, and house dimensions can all affect whether an integrator considers the facility competitive. A lower acquisition price can be erased by mandatory renovations. The buyer should care less about how impressive the buildings look from the road and more about the remaining useful life of the equipment and the contract requirements attached to them. Then come the birds. But ownership depends on the model. In a typical contract broiler arrangement, the integrator supplies the chicks, feed, veterinary support, transportation, and technical guidance. The grower supplies the houses, equipment, utilities, labor, and day-to-day management. The integrator generally retains ownership of the birds. That structure transfers a large share of feed price and chicken market risk away from the grower, but it does not eliminate financial risk. The grower is still carrying fixed investment, maintenance, utilities, and debt on a specialized property whose economic value may depend heavily on continued access to an integrator. Grower compensation has historically included systems that compare flock performance among groups of farms. Those ranking systems are often called tournaments. USDA has taken regulatory action aimed at changing certain payment and capital improvement practices, but the timing of those rules has been subject to federal changes and delay proposals. The practical lesson for a buyer is simple. Never model a poultry farm from an old payment formula. Read the actual grower contract. Understand base compensation, bonuses or adjustments, placement expectations, required upgrades, termination provisions, and how often the contract itself is renewed. Feed works differently for an independent layer operator. Here, feed can dominate operating cost. USDA and university extension material commonly describe feed as the largest cost of raising poultry. And commercial diets rely heavily on grains and protein ingredients. That means an independent producer is exposed to corn and soybean markets, freight formulation changes, and supplier pricing. A few cents per pound can become a major annual difference when thousands of birds eat every day. Feed efficiency also determines how much biological performance turns into financial performance. In broilers, feed conversion ratio measures how much feed is required to produce a unit of live weight. Lower feed use for the same healthy weight gain generally means better conversion. The grower under contract may not directly purchase the feed, but poor conversion can still matter because performance affects the integrator's economics and may influence grower compensation. For an independent producer who buys feed, the effect is even more direct. Inefficient conversion means more cash leaves the business to produce the same saleable output. Water consumption becomes a management, signal as well as a utility expense. Experienced poultry managers watch changes in water use because a sudden drop can indicate a health problem, equipment failure, pressure issue, or environmental change. The same is true of feed consumption, mortality, temperature, humidity, and bird weights. A commercial poultry farm is managed through daily measurements. Small deviations multiplied across tens of thousands of birds become large financial differences. And that leads to the risk that separates poultry from many other asset-heavy businesses. A laundromat can lose a washing machine without infecting every other machine in the building. A poultry house is different. Birds are living organisms sharing air, litter, water systems, equipment, workers, and traffic patterns. Pathogens can move through that environment rapidly. Highly pathogenic avian influenza remains an active concern in the United States, and USDA describes HPAI as capable of killing entire domestic poultry flocks within days. Biosecurity, therefore, functions like operational risk control. Vehicles, footwear, visitors, equipment, wild birds, rodents, litter, and dead bird handling. Good farms control traffic, restrict unnecessary entry, clean and disinfect appropriate equipment, manage pests, use dedicated clothing or footwear where required, and follow integrator or veterinary protocols. The exact program varies by farm, but the economic principle does not. Prevention costs money every day, while failure can interrupt revenue for weeks or months. USDA continues to emphasize routine biosecurity as a primary defense. Against avian influenza and other infectious poultry diseases, waste management is another place where biology turns into economics. Broiler litter contains bedding, manure, feathers, and spilled feed. It can have value as a fertilizer, but it is not automatically free revenue. The farm still has to store, handle, transport, apply, or sell it in a way that fits nutrient management and environmental rules. Local soil conditions, acreage, buyer demand, hauling distance, and nutrient content affect whether litter becomes a useful secondary income stream or simply another operating responsibility. The same principle applies to mortality disposal. Routine bird losses have to be handled through approved methods that may include composting or other systems permitted in the area. None of these items is glamorous, but they influence site design, labor, equipment, neighbor relations, and regulatory exposure. A buyer who values manure income without pricing the handling cost is making the same mistake as a retailer who counts sales but ignores freight. Secondary revenue only improves the business when the cash received exceeds the extra cost and risk required to earn it. The 2025 U.S. poultry numbers show why the stakes are large. USDA reported that broiler production remained the largest component of poultry sector value in recent years, while the value of U.S. egg production reached tens of billions of dollars. That does not mean the average farmer is wealthy. It means poultry is a huge industry built from many production assets, processing plants, feed systems, transportation networks, and contracts. Industry size and individual owner income are two completely different numbers. USDA reported $31.5 billion in value for U.S. egg production in 2025, while ERS reported broilers as the largest component of poultry sector value in 2024. Now consider a simplified contract broiler example. Daniel is evaluating an existing 4-house farm in the southeast. The seller points to years of flock placements and tells him the farm stays busy. Daniel does not start with the seller's gross receipts. He starts with the contract and the debt. He builds a model with annual grower payments on one side and utilities, litter management, insurance, repairs, labor, property expenses, taxes where applicable, and scheduled equipment replacement on the other. Then he adds the loan payment. After that, he adds a reserve for renovations because the houses will not remain current forever. The result is very different from simply subtracting a few monthly bills from gross revenue. Suppose the operating business produces enough cash to look healthy before financing. That is not the same as owner income. If debt service absorbs a large portion of the remaining cash, Daniel may own a $1 million class facility while paying himself something closer to an ordinary wage. If he hires a full-time manager instead of providing much of the labor himself, payroll rises again. If the integrator later requires upgraded controllers, drinker lines, insulation, or ventilation, the capital reserve becomes important. Without it, the next improvement may require additional borrowing. This is the central contradiction of contract poultry. The grower can be protected from some commodity price swings while still carrying heavy asset risk. The integrator owns the birds and provides major production inputs, but the grower may own the highly specialized real estate and equipment. A strong contract relationship can make those assets productive. Losing placements or facing expensive upgrade requirements can weaken their economics quickly. Layer farms shift the pressure. Instead of being paid primarily for growing birds for someone else, the operator earns revenue from eggs and sometimes secondary outputs such as spent hens or manure, depending on the system and market. Gross revenue can be large because eggs move every day. But now the owner may be purchasing feed, replacing the laying flock, paying labor, handling packaging, managing egg collection and storage, meeting food safety requirements, and carrying market price risk. Egg revenue is also volatile. A rise in egg prices can make a layer farm look extraordinarily profitable for a period, especially if the flock remains healthy while national supply is constrained. But high prices are not a permanent business model. As supply changes, disease pressure changes, or production recovers, selling prices can fall, while debt, payroll, utilities, and feed bills remain. Expanding because one unusually strong year makes the economics look effortless is one of the easiest ways to turn temporary pricing into permanent debt. Scale changes the calculation, but does not automatically solve it. A small poultry business can target direct-to-consumer or specialty markets, but its housing, labor, processing, packaging, and feed costs per bird may be much higher than those of a commercial operation. A larger farm spreads fixed costs across more production and can justify automation, but it also concentrates more biological and financial exposure on one site. Bigger can improve unit economics, while making one operational failure more expensive. Labor is another line owners often underprice, because family labor does not always appear as a payroll expense. Birds need care every day. Alarms do not respect weekends. Equipment problems occur at night. Houses require preparation between flocks. Records must be maintained. Deliveries have to be coordinated. Dead birds must be handled appropriately. Litter and manure need management. If the owner performs those jobs, the work still has economic value. If the owner does not perform them, someone has to be paid. Maintenance follows the same rule. Fans wear out. Bearings fail. Belts break. Pumps clog. Controllers age. Curtains, insulation, pads, sensors, heaters, augers, drinkers, and generators all require attention. A farm that reports attractive cash flow only because it postponed maintenance is not necessarily producing true economic profit. It may simply be consuming its own equipment. Technology can help, but it should be evaluated as a return on investment tool rather than a decoration. Modern controllers and sensors can track temperature, humidity, static pressure, water consumption, and equipment status. Remote alarms can warn an operator when conditions leave the acceptable range. Cameras and newer monitoring systems can add another layer of observation. The benefit is not that technology removes the need for management. The benefit is that it can reduce the time between a problem starting and the operator noticing it. So where does real wealth come from in poultry ownership? Usually not from one spectacular flock. It comes from surviving long enough for capital structure, operating discipline, and asset equity to work together. A grower who finances a facility sensibly, maintains the houses, keeps access to a strong integrator, controls utility costs, protects bird performance, and avoids catastrophic interruptions may gradually reduce debt and build equity. An independent producer who manages feed, purchasing flock, health, marketing, working capital, and price volatility, can also create a durable business. But both paths depend on years of competent execution. The property itself matters here. Poultry houses are specialized assets. Their resale value is not identical to the amount spent building them. A buyer asks whether the site can continue receiving birds, whether the houses remain competitive, whether environmental and permitting obligations are manageable, and whether another integrator or another use is realistically available if the current relationship changes. That means the owner's net worth on paper can be different from the amount of cash the property would produce in a forced sale. Financing deserves the same caution. A lender may evaluate collateral, contract history, projected cash flow, borrower equity, and management experience. Loan terms vary widely, so there is no responsible universal interest rate or debt service figure for a poultry farm. What matters is debt coverage. The operation has to generate enough cash not only for normal expenses and loan payments, but also for bad weather, repairs, downtime, and future capital work. If the model only functions when every flock performs perfectly, the model is fragile. Working capital is especially important for independent operations. Revenue may arrive on one schedule, while feed, payroll, utilities, packaging, repairs, insurance, and flock replacement demand cash on another. Profit on an annual income statement does not guarantee that money is available on the day a large bill arrives. That timing difference is cash flow, and businesses fail from cash flow pressure even when their long-run economics appear acceptable. There is also no single national answer to whether poultry farming is a good business. A modern contract farm with a dependable integrator, manageable leverage, updated houses, strong water and power infrastructure, and disciplined management can look very different from an older, highly leveraged farm facing upgrade requirements. A layer operation with efficient housing, strong market access, healthy birds, and well-managed feed costs can look very different from one that expanded at the top of an egg price cycle. The final lesson is not that poultry farms are bad investments or easy fortunes. It is that the business rewards a very specific kind of owner. You are not simply buying chickens and waiting for them to grow. You are financing specialized buildings, managing living inventory, maintaining industrial environmental systems, operating under biological risk, and depending on contracts or commodity markets that can change the value of your output. The owner who understands those systems has a chance to build something durable. The owner who focuses only on how many birds fit in a house or how much revenue a farm produced last year can miss the costs that matter most. In poultry, the headline number is rarely the decision. The decision lives in the contract, the debt, the equipment, the daily performance data, the disease controls, and the amount of cash left after everything else has been paid. If you found this breakdown useful, like the video and subscribe for more business ownership economics. The goal here is not to sell you the dream of ownership. It is to show you what the dream costs to operate.